All right, team, this is the green light. Commence demolition on the bridge structure immediately.
My authority is absolute. And as for you sitting in the front row, you pathetic little troublemakers, your resistance ends now.
They demolished my great-grandmother's 75-year-old bridge while I was watching my son walk across the stage at Stanford. I returned from Marcus's graduation ceremony to find hand-carved redwood beams reduced to splinters, crystal-clear spring water, now a muddy torrent, and the acrid smell of chainsaw fuel poisoning the mountain air. The carefully engineered crossing that had protected our Colorado Canyon community since 1948 obliterated in 3 hours by a woman who relocated from Manhattan 18 months ago. There stood Victoria Ravencroft on her glass-walled balcony, clutching what appeared to be Prosecco, observing raw snowmelt flooding into her own gated community's retention ponds. The HOA violation notice stapled to my gate, $18,500 in retroactive structural assessment fees for a bridge that existed before her luxury development was even a billionaire's fever dream. Here's what they don't tell you in HOA leadership seminars. Gravity always wins. And I'm a retired civil engineer who spent 20 years designing earthquake-resistant infrastructure. I know exactly how to redirect its force. What would you do if power-hungry bureaucrats destroyed something your ancestors built with their bare hands? My name's Sebastian Thornfield Bass, to anyone who's earned the privilege of informality. Fourth-generation owner of 22 acres that my great-grandmother Elena carved from Rocky Mountain wilderness back when women solved engineering problems with dynamite and determination instead of permits and homeowners associations. Elena constructed our bridge in 1948 using hand-hewn redwood beams and Depression-era ingenuity she'd learned working on Boulder Dam. No modern fasteners, just mortise and tenon joints fitted so precisely they'd been channeling spring runoff for 75 years. I inherited more than real estate when Elena passed. I got her engineering instincts and 21 years of structural design experience. After 2 decades building bridges across earthquake zones and a corporate burnout, I was perfectly content living in our hand-built timber home, watching my son Marcus grow up where mountain bluebirds nested and afternoon sunlight filtered through aspen branches like nature's own cathedral windows. Then the developers arrived. Pine Summit Estates materialized around us in 2008 like Arash McMansions for people who thought authentic rustic architecture was something you ordered from Restoration Hardware. Our spring became their water feature. Our flood control became their eyesore. Most neighbors were decent people, but every development needs its tyrant, and ours arrived with a Manhattan attitude and the interpersonal skills of a particularly territorial Wolverine. Enter Victoria Ravencroft, former urban planning consultant, current HOA president serving 4 consecutive terms, future migraine wrapped in Burberry. She piloted a pearl-white Range Rover that never accumulated trail dust, maintained landscaping so artificial it resembled a golf course on life support, and had mastered the art of smiling while mentally calculating how much your primitive mountain lifestyle was damaging her property valuation. The opening salvo came 3 months after Marcus's college acceptance letter. "Mr. Thornfield," she announced, positioned on my deck wearing hiking boots that had clearly never encountered actual hiking. "We need to address your property's compliance with community aesthetic standards. Compliance as if I were defective machinery requiring software patches." "Ma'am, my property predates your community by 6 decades, I responded. "That's precisely the issue." She produced documentation thick enough to stop small caliber rounds. "Your antiquated infrastructure creates liability concerns. That bridge, particularly, it's generating insurance exposure. Frankly, Mr. Thornfield, certain residents find your lifestyle incompatible with our investment protection strategy." My lifestyle translation: your kind doesn't belong in our zip code. I proposed compromise, regular inspections, minor reinforcement, whatever would maintain neighborhood harmony. But Victoria had that predatory expression people develop when they've identified you as the problem. Her first hostile action: she contacted code enforcement, claiming my property posed environmental hazards because Marcus occasionally brought his girlfriend's niece for weekend visits. Anonymous complaint, naturally. But the timing was surgical right during graduation planning. The harassment offensive had officially commenced. 4 weeks after the code enforcement visit, which mercifully concluded with the inspector apologizing for the transparently malicious report, certified mail arrived that made Victoria's previous harassment seem like amateur hour. $18,500 in retroactive structural assessment fees for my 75-year-old bridge. According to HOA consultant Brennan Ravencroft, yes, you noticed that surname My Bridge was adversely affecting downstream hydraulic management systems and required immediate structural evaluation assessment fees. The twisted reasoning was almost impressive in its brazenness. My Bridge, which had been managing spring runoff since before their development existed, was somehow retroactively responsible for improvements they'd installed to handle drainage from houses that shouldn't have been constructed on a flood-prone canyon slope. 45 days to remit payment or face remediation proceedings. But here's where Victoria committed her first catastrophic error. I'm a paranoid retired engineer who believes in verification. A straightforward internet search on Mr. Brennan Ravencroft revealed something crucial. This expert held licenses in New York but was practicing hydraulic consulting in Colorado without proper state certification. During my corporate years, I'd witnessed contractors attempt this jurisdictional shell game constantly. My counterstrike was swift, surgical, and extremely public. I filed complaints with the Colorado State Licensing Board regarding unlicensed professional practice, demanded itemized documentation of every alleged improvement these fees supposedly covered, and requested HOA financial transparency at their monthly assembly in front of 78 residents who suddenly realized they'd been funding a personal vendetta. A simple credential verification had just demolished months of expensive legal preparation. Victoria's response was predictably defensive and spectacularly foolish. She dispatched passive-aggressive emails about harassment of professional consultants and scheduled an emergency board meeting conveniently excluding non-residents like me. But the damage was spreading like water through fractured concrete. Long-term residents like Nathan Silverstone, a retired professor who'd lived here 35 years, began asking uncomfortable questions about why they were suddenly paying emergency assessments to finance legal battles they'd never authorized. The community was fracturing along predictable fault lines, newer residents clutching their property value, anxieties like life preservers, while established neighbors quietly wondered when their neighborhood association had transformed into something that would embarrass organized crime families. Anonymous social media harassment escalated. Someone was spreading rumors about unstable veterans and dangerous bridge infrastructure. Victoria's response to my licensing board complaint arrived faster than audit notices on lottery winners. Enter Castellan and Partners, the variety of aggressive property law firm that makes personal injury attorneys look dignified by comparison. The revised claim: my bridge created catastrophic liability exposure for the HOA, and I required professional liability insurance or immediate removal proceedings, would commence. The pressure offensive escalated with military-grade efficiency. Daily certified letters arrived like clockwork, each one amplifying the language and compressing the deadlines. County inspectors began materializing at inconvenient times, always responding to anonymous safety complaints. Then, while sorting through the legal avalanche one evening, I discovered something that made my coffee taste bitter with irony. Victoria's legal fees weren't coming from her designer wallet. They were being funded through emergency assessments levied on every HOA resident, including the very people she claimed to be protecting from my dangerous bridge. My neighbor, Nathan Silverstone, confirmed the scheme when he appeared at my door, clutching his assessment notice like evidence of war crimes. "Bass," he said, "I've been financing legal fees to destroy your family's bridge. When exactly did we vote to fund this woman's personal crusade?" The answer, naturally, was never. Victoria had been operating like a dictator, using community funds to finance personal vendettas. My counterstrike involved strategic precision. I contacted Diana Flores, a property rights attorney who specialized in water law and harbored a professional grudge against HOA overreach. I filed public records requests for every county communication regarding my property. Most importantly, I began documenting each HOA bylaw violation with methodical thoroughness. The legal discovery revealed what I'd suspected. The HOA had never properly established authority over pre-existing properties. Multiple board decisions violated Colorado open meetings law requirements. Community response was swift and deeply satisfying. Nathan started attending every HOA meeting armed with pointed questions about financial transparency. Claire Mountain View, a widow on fixed income, began organizing other residents who'd suddenly realized they were bankrolling someone else's power fantasy. Clandestine meetings assembled in my kitchen, where the aroma of strong coffee mixed with the quiet determination of people who'd finally recognized they'd been systematically exploited. Victoria's desperation became obvious when she issued a 72-hour emergency abatement order, claiming sudden bridge inspection had revealed catastrophic structural deficiencies requiring immediate demolition. The timing was surgically precise, scheduled for Marcus's graduation weekend, when family obligations would supposedly prevent me from interfering. The morning of Marcus's graduation dawned clear and brilliant. I was adjusting my suit, thinking about watching my son receive his Stanford engineering degree, when the sound of heavy equipment shattered the morning peace. 5:30 a.m. Diesel engines roaring, excavators warming up for destruction. I stepped onto my deck and witnessed them, a demolition crew positioned around my great-grandmother's bridge. Victoria stood nearby in designer outdoor wear, directing the operation with gleeful efficiency. "Emergency safety order," she announced when she noticed me, brandishing an official-looking document. "Structural inspection revealed immediate collapse risk. We're protecting the community from your negligence." But my engineering eye caught something crucial. Her emergency order had dates that didn't align with reality. The inspection, supposedly triggering this urgent demolition, had been conducted 4 weeks earlier, and the work permit was actually an expired authorization from an unrelated project. "Folks," I called out to the growing crowd of early arriving graduation guests, "you might want to document this. Mrs. Ravencroft is about to commit what appears to be destruction of private property using fraudulent documentation during a family celebration. But Victoria had made one spectacular miscalculation today. Wasn't just my 12 son's graduation. It was the day she'd invited 200 witnesses to observe her destroy my family's legacy, including retired Judge Franklin Ashford and military chaplain Reverend Michael Cross. The first hydraulic claw bit into redwood that had weathered 75 years of Colorado weather. Within 90 minutes, what had taken my great-grandmother months to construct was reduced to debris and muddy chaos. The ceremony relocated to the University Chapel, Marcus's dress shoes mud-stained, and 200 graduation guests transformed into very angry witnesses to what looked increasingly like premeditated vandalism. Judge Ashford cornered me during the relocated reception. "Bass, that wasn't a legal demolition. Emergency orders require specific protocols, and what I witnessed was either catastrophic incompetence or deliberate fraud with federal implications." Reverend Cross offered connections to investigative journalists who specialized in government overreach stories. The immediate consequences were swift and poetic. Uncontrolled water flow began flooding HOA common areas within hours. Local news picked up the graduation day demolition story by evening. Social media exploded with hashtags and darkly humorous commentary. Several board members quietly developed selective amnesia about supporting Victoria's leadership style. But the real game changer was hiding among the graduation debris. As we cleaned up the next morning, wind-blown documents from the flooding had scattered across my property, including water-damaged HOA financial records that had literally blown from Victoria's residence during the chaos her own destruction had unleashed. Those soggy papers contained secrets that would transform this personal vendetta into a federal criminal case. The water-damaged documents scattered across my property looked like confetti from hell's own celebration. As I smoothed out the soggy papers on my kitchen table, I realized Victoria's flood had delivered something more valuable than revenge. It had delivered a confession written in her own handwriting. HOA financial records told a story that made her bridge obsession suddenly crystal clear. This wasn't about safety or liability, this was about covering up theft that would make Bernie Madoff blush. The first document stopped me cold. A bank statement showing the HOA's actual balance. Negative $1.2 million. $1.2 million in debt from a beautification initiative. But that number was just the opening act. Invoice after invoice revealed payments to Ravencroft Environmental Consulting, a company that existed only in Victoria's imagination and bank account. $310,000 for landscaping work that had never been performed, maintenance that had never happened. The timeline hit me like avalanche debris. Victoria had been systematically draining community funds for 30 months using shell companies and fake invoices. When residents started questioning rising assessments and declining services, she needed a distraction spectacular enough to justify emergency expenditures and insurance claims. Enter my great-grandmother's bridge, not as a safety hazard, but as a financial scapegoat. The insurance correspondence made my engineer's brain ache. Email chains between Victoria and an adjuster discussed how catastrophic upstream infrastructure failure could trigger massive coverage for flood damage to common areas. The plan was elegantly simple and thoroughly criminal. Destroy my bridge, blame the resulting chaos on failed pre-existing infrastructure, and use insurance payouts to replace stolen money while painting me as the negligent property owner. My family's 75-year legacy had become the patsy for her 30-month crime spree, but desperation had made Victoria sloppy. Email timestamps showed she'd been planning insurance fraud before the bridge destruction, complete with pre-staged photographs of pre-existing damage. The smoking gun was buried in a folder marked Reserve Accounts, bank transfer records showing HOA funds flowing to offshore accounts in Grand Cayman, international money laundering operations that would impress cartel accountants. Diana Flores's assessment the next morning was professionally devastating. "Bass," she said, spreading the evidence across her conference table, "this isn't simple embezzlement. We're looking at wire fraud, mail fraud, insurance fraud, conspiracy, and money laundering. Federal prosecutors will be competing over who gets to try this case." The power dynamic had just executed a complete reversal. I wasn't defending my property against HOA overreach. I was sitting on evidence that would send their president to federal prison for decades. But timing would determine whether we caught a thief or just scared away a flight risk. Exposing Victoria immediately might trigger evidence destruction or express flights to non-extradition countries. The smart play involved letting her continue digging while federal authorities built an escape-proof case. Judge Ashford's federal connections proved invaluable for coordinating the investigation without alerting our target. The irony was delicious. Victoria had destroyed my family's heritage to cover up stealing from the very neighbors she'd convinced to fund her legal war against me. Those same people would soon have front-row seats to watching their trusted leader get arrested for robbing them systematically. My kitchen table had transformed into a war room covered with evidence folders, legal documents, and enough coffee cups to caffeinate a small battalion. The team assembled represented everything Victoria had catastrophically underestimated about mountain community networks and engineering precision planning. Diana Flores brought property rights expertise and a personal vendetta against HOA corruption. Judge Franklin Ashford contributed federal connections and 4 decades of legal strategy. Reverend Cross offered community organizing skills and moral authority. Our resident intelligence network consisted of motivated neighbors. Nathan Silverstone had access to HOA meeting minutes and observational skills honed by academic politics. Claire Mountain View tracked financial irregularities with spreadsheet precision. Preston Whitewood, the former board member who'd resigned in disgust, had kept copies of everything. Diana mapped out our legal strategy like a general planning a campaign. We document every HOA bylaw violation while preparing criminal referrals for embezzlement and fraud. Civil suits for property destruction will run parallel to challenges against the HOA's fundamental authority. Judge Ashford's forensic accounting contact agreed to audit HOA books. His FBI connection would investigate insurance fraud with federal resources and subpoena power. Reverend Cross's investigative journalist contacts practically salivated over the story. Bureaucratic corruption, veteran family targeted, community funds stolen, graduation day destruction. Meanwhile, our neighborhood intelligence network operated with CIA-level efficiency. Nathan's daily walks conveniently passed Victoria's house, documenting suspicious contractor visits and luxury purchases inconsistent with claims of HOA financial difficulties. We organized like a neighborhood watch program crossed with a federal task force, sharing intelligence through encrypted messaging and weekly coffee meetings that appeared completely innocent. Nobody suspects church volunteers and retired professors of conducting sophisticated financial investigations. The community response exceeded our most optimistic projections. People who'd been afraid to question authority discovered courage in numbers. Victoria's reaction was predictably paranoid and spectacularly counterproductive. Security cameras sprouted around her property. She stopped attending public meetings. Bank records showed asset transfers to offshore accounts, accelerating exactly what federal investigators needed to document active money laundering in real time. My property became the secure document storage facility. Digital copies lived at Diana's law firm under attorney-client privilege. Physical evidence went into Judge Ashford's personal safe. Victoria's discovery that her missing financial documents had blown straight into enemy hands triggered a meltdown that transformed months of calculated harassment into weeks of increasingly desperate criminal activity. Her first move proved that panic destroys judgment. She broke into my property at 1 a.m., searching for documents already safely locked away. My security cameras captured every moment of her amateur burglary attempt. Her sabotage campaign escalated. Social media posts appeared questioning my mental stability and spreading rumors about dangerous veteran behavior. The harassment crossed every line. Anonymous complaints to the VA questioning my disability benefits, false reports to Adult Protective Services. She even attempted to challenge Marcus's degree verification, but Victoria's desperation produced one gift that perfectly illustrated how panic makes intelligent people do impossibly stupid things. She hired a private investigator named Roland Chen to find dirt on our coalition members. What Victoria didn't realize was that Roland Chen was FBI Special Agent Roland Chen, already investigating HOA financial crimes when she'd essentially paid federal law enforcement to strengthen their case against her. My counterpunch involved methodical documentation that drives desperate criminals toward increasingly reckless behavior. Every harassment attempt was recorded, photographed, and filed with appropriate authorities. The community response was swift. Residents who'd been neutral suddenly realized that someone willing to break into neighbors' homes might not represent ideal community leadership. The bribery attempt happened at Summit Coffee House, where Victoria arrived with desperate confidence. "Mr. Thornfield," she said, sliding an envelope across the table, "I believe we can resolve this unfortunate misunderstanding. $650,000 for those documents, and we can all move forward." The smell of fresh espresso mixed with her expensive perfume and the unmistakable scent of pure desperation as she offered to purchase evidence of her own crimes. What made the moment particularly satisfying was the recording device Agent Chen had suggested I carry. The quality of her recorded confession would have impressed federal prosecutors. Agent Chen later informed me that Victoria had inadvertently committed 4 additional federal crimes during our 20-minute coffee meeting, including bribery, attempted obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to commit evidence tampering. Victoria's final desperate gambit involved liquidating remaining HOA funds while planning to flee the country. She'd booked flights to nations without extradition treaties, transferred assets to accounts already under federal surveillance, and scheduled one last emergency board meeting. Agent Chen's evening updates became our daily entertainment. Victoria was essentially following a criminal activity checklist designed by law enforcement to make federal prosecutions easier. Victoria's last stand began with a propaganda campaign combining the subtlety of a car alarm with the accuracy of a blindfolded dart thrower. Professional flyers appeared featuring stock photos and headlines screaming, "Protect our community from extremist threats." According to Victoria's alternate universe, I was leading a dangerous cell of radicalized veterans who posed an immediate threat to family safety and property values. She'd organized an emergency community security meeting with all the theatrical production value of a small-town political rally. The venue was our flood-damaged community center, because nothing says credible leadership like holding meetings in buildings damaged by your own decisions. Her hired security consisted of off-duty sheriff's deputies who looked professional until you realized they were unknowingly providing muscle for someone about to star in a federal perp walk. But Victoria's final deception was her criminal masterpiece. Every dollar she transferred to her escape fund was flowing directly into an FBI sting operation, so convincing she was essentially paying federal law enforcement to document her money laundering. Agent Chin had created a shell corporation so professionally fraudulent that Victoria was voluntarily funding her own prosecution. Meanwhile, our coalition's preparation proceeded with quiet efficiency. FBI agents positioned themselves throughout the community, disguised as concerned residents. Local media crews had been briefed, but agreed to maintain silence until the appropriate moment. The irony was so concentrated, it could have been bottled. Victoria had scheduled her propaganda performance in a building damaged by flooding she'd caused, funded by money she'd stolen, surrounded by federal agents she'd accidentally hired to investigate her crimes. Her arrival was choreographed with dramatic flair. She emerged from a rented Mercedes SUV, almost certainly financed with embezzled funds, wearing an outfit that projected authority she'd never legally possessed. Victoria's prepared speech focused on protecting community investment from extremist elements. She planned to deliver this performance while standing on a stage surrounded by water damage caused by her own vandalism, denouncing people whose money she'd stolen. The Pine Summit Community Center had never hosted anything quite like Victoria's final performance. 230 residents packed into a space that smelled like mildew and broken promises. Victoria made her entrance with the confidence of someone who'd confused delusion with strategy. Her PowerPoint presentation was a masterpiece of projection. Slide after slide depicted dangerous veterans and property value threats, while completely ignoring the water stains covering the walls around Fudia. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victoria began, "we face an unprecedented threat to our neighborhood safety and investment security. Extremist elements have infiltrated our community, spreading dangerous lies about our financial management. The audience reactions split along predictable lines. My coalition occupied the front row with calm confidence. Victoria's fatal mistake came 23 minutes into her presentation, when overconfidence transformed careful lies into brazen admissions. I personally authorized the removal of that dangerous bridge structure," she declared, "because community safety takes precedence over sentimental attachments to outdated infrastructure. The admission of destruction of private property was recorded by multiple cameras and witnessed by 240 residents. The HOA exercises full authority over all neighborhood properties," she continued, "and we will take whatever legal action necessary to protect our community from troublemakers who spread lies about our financial management." That's when I stood up, approaching the microphone. "Mrs. Ravencroft," I said, "thank you for confessing to destruction of private property on camera. Now let's talk about something really interesting, like the $1.2 million in HOA debt you've been hiding." The silence that followed was so complete you could have heard a pin drop. "And the $310,000 you've stolen from your neighbors' pockets through fake invoices to shell companies you control," I continued. "Should we discuss that on camera? Or would you prefer to wait for the federal agents to read you your rights?" Victoria's face went through a color transition that would have impressed chameleons. "Those are lies!" she screamed. "Security, remove these troublemakers!" But her security detail had noticed the unusually large number of residents displaying federal badges. Agent Chen stepped forward. "Mrs. Victoria Ravencroft, you're under arrest for wire fraud, mail fraud, money laundering, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit insurance fraud." The sound of handcuffs clicking closed echoed through the sudden silence. Victoria's demands to stop this conspiracy were drowned out by the Miranda warning. The community's reaction was immediate. Spontaneous applause erupted from residents who'd finally watched justice arrive. Local news cameras captured every moment as Victoria was escorted from the building she'd damaged, past residents she'd stolen from. The live stream went viral within minutes. National media picked up the story by morning. The remaining HOA board dissolved faster than sugar in rain. Community members voted unanimously to create a resident-controlled neighborhood association based on transparency and accountability. Agent Chen later told me that Victoria had managed to commit 5 additional federal crimes during her final speech. Justice moved swiftly once federal prosecutors had Victoria's recorded confessions, documented money transfers, and mountains of evidence. She pled guilty to avoid a 20-year sentence, receiving 8 years in federal prison, complete asset forfeiture, and a restitution order that would follow her forever. The $3.4 million recovery exceeded our most optimistic projections. Every stolen dollar returned to the community, plus punitive damages. My personal settlement for property destruction came to $850,000, which felt less like compensation and more like cosmic irony. But money couldn't rebuild 75 years of family heritage that would require something more valuable than cash. The bridge restoration became a community project that would have made my great-grandmother proud, combining her original redwood with modern engineering. Marcus and his fiancée moved into the renovated timber home that autumn. The sound of young voices echoing across water that flowed clean and controlled felt like the best possible ending to a story that had started with destruction and spite. The Pine Summit Residents Association replaced the HOA with democratic voting and transparent budgets. Property values increased when buyers realized they could purchase homes in a community run by residents instead of aspiring dictators. We established the Thornfield Veterans Resource Center for PTSD counseling using Victoria's restitution payments. The irony of using her stolen money to help veterans she'd tried to demonize felt like justice with a sense of humor. The Pine Summit Environmental Education Center opened near the restored bridge, where schools bring children to learn about water management and community cooperation. Our annual Freedom from HOA Festival celebrates community independence with food trucks, live music, and educational booths about legal rights. The Scholarship Fund helps young veterans pursue education in engineering, law, and public administration. Reverend Cross's community organizing efforts spread beyond our neighborhood, helping other subdivisions identify financial irregularities. Judge Ashford became our unofficial legal advisor, teaching residents about oversight requirements. Diana Flores established herself as the region's leading expert on property rights law. The ripple effects exceeded anything we'd anticipated. Colorado legislature passed HOA reform requiring independent financial audits. Other states began investigating their own association oversight requirements. The FBI created a task force specifically for HOA financial crimes, using our case as training material. The final scene played out exactly where it should have, at the restored bridge, where 4 generations of my family had celebrated life's important moments. Marcus's wedding ceremony brought together everyone who'd helped transform personal vindication into community healing. Judge Ashford performed the ceremony while Reverend Cross blessed water that flowed, controlled, and purposeful. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's building something better than what they tried to destroy. Standing up to bullies doesn't just save your own property, it saves entire communities from people who mistake authority for permission to steal. Share your own HOA horror story in the comments. You might help someone else fighting similar battles. The spring flows clear over restored timber, carrying promises that water always finds its proper course when good people refuse to let corruption dam the flow of justice toward where it belongs.